All right, hello everyone and welcome for our Inclusion and Wellbeing Forum for September 2025. We hope that you've had a very good start to your new academic year and that everyone is settling in well, getting used to their new kids and meeting everyone and getting back into the flow of things. Our session today is going to look at supporting our new students, welcoming new inclusion teams, and getting your inclusion department set up for the day or for the year ahead. Okay, as usual, all of our forums are recorded. They are all shared on our YouTube channel where they're free to access for everyone. We would ask that all mics be muted on entry. If you have any questions, you can pop them into the chat and Harmeet and I will monitor the chat together. We want to keep the focus on schools, students and practices. So if you have any questions, no problem, but please don't name a school individually or students. While we welcome practitioners and we welcome providers, it's a free forum. It is not around support selling or any kind of commercial effort. So please don't talk about any kind of services or anything that's available. We always like to remind everyone that both Harmeet and I are in the same boat as you, essentially, working with schools and working under the guidelines of the regulators across the country. So while we can give you advice and guidance, it's always best to check with your school and your policies first, always running things by your own SLT and your own leadership teams. Okay, so the first thing...
Can I just add in, for those of you who have questions and who are LSAs, we will have our LSA forum next week on the Tuesday. I'll share the posters out again. But because you are all heads of inclusion here, I wanted to intentionally mention this so that it will filter down to your LSAs for the next forum on next Tuesday, which is focusing on strategies and support for the back to school thingy. I can't remember exactly the title, but I'll share it with you. Remember, our forums are done by LSAs for LSAs. I'm just there to support them.
Okay, wonderful. Okay, so as a Senko, when Harmeet and I were both Senkos, we used to often say that we spend most of our day running around from pillar to post, and you often don't get time to go to the toilet or to have a drink or to have lunch or anything. So one of the first things that we have to be mindful of is personal well-being and personal protection. So thinking about how you're managing your time as a head of inclusion, as a SEN teacher or as an LSA, how do you manage your time when you're working with people of determination particularly? I remember I had one year, we had a very challenging child who needed a lot of personal restraint and care. And for many months, I found that everything else in the inclusion department under me was getting left behind because I was spending hours and hours every day restraining or working with this child, with the then vice principal. And I realized in hindsight that that really was not a priority. It should not have been taking up so much of my time because all of my other students suffered because of it. And it's really valuable that you step back and do a little time analysis on the things that you're doing. What is the value of what you're doing? Like, is the input that you're giving for one or two activities, is it worth the amount of time? And when I became an inspector, I really realized the amount of time that we spend on documentation and that very often nobody gets the chance to read it. So one thing that I say to every inclusion lead when I meet them now is don't spend all of your time doing documentation. Focus on delivery and support and tracking your impact. But creating huge big folders for inspection really is not a good use of your time because very often we don't have time to look at them. And it's really sad when you see so much effort gone into creating those big folders and often there's no time to read them. So A useful little task to do is to think of the important and not important things you're doing, the urgent and not urgent, and to really make a list of where your priorities should be every week as an inclusion lead. It's really important to think about your self-care when you're opening, perhaps if you're new to an inclusion role, or if you're leading a big department, or if you have had a huge influx of SEND kids. Now, we're hearing from schools all across the country that we're getting more and more applications for mainstream for profound, moderate and profound needs. And this is where you really have to be mindful of your capacity and your team's capacity, and it can be really stressful. So never be afraid to ask for help or to say no. It's okay to say no to either support or to even a student on entry if you feel that you do not have the capacity to meet their needs in your campus. And again, if you are doing that, you need to really document that process really carefully and do it with the support of your regulator, whether that is ADEC or KHDA, SPIA, RACDOC, or the new ASDOC. Okay, what does a student of determination look like? And I think everyone here, we all know that it can be absolutely anyone. Any student can be a student of determination. And there are a lot of areas of concern that may not be very visible. Actually, the majority of areas of need, they're not visible. So it's important to really work with your teachers very carefully to ensure that they are identifying students' needs, because without identification, we cannot support them. So that is the first and most important step for any team. So that brings me on to our next slide. At the start of a new year, many schools will have lots of new teachers. So a priority for an inclusion lead should be, if you can, get into the classes to do learning walks or observations with the new teachers. Try to get to know those who are skilled, those who may lack the skills in terms of identification and support, and understand where their greatest areas of need are. So observing their lessons if you can, and observing the students in their classes to ensure that they haven't missed identification for anyone. This is really important. And you might also find that you can find really talented teachers who are new to your team, who might be particularly skilled in behavior management or particularly skilled in understanding and supporting a specific need, like maybe dyslexia or autism or ADHD, and then utilizing those teachers to model for other teachers. So that's a really important part for the first few weeks when you're in classes. Now, most importantly is to get to know your students. Now, Mita and I used to always say, wait at least 3 to 4 weeks before you start taking referrals, because those first few weeks of school, everyone is a bit discombobulated. The teachers are a little bit off kilter. The students will be behaving differently. Everyone needs a little time to settle into new schools, new classes, new teachers. When I was a KG teacher, we used to give maybe 6 weeks for kids to settle in, especially in KG1, because often a child might have really challenging behaviors for weeks and weeks before they finally get into their routine and get used to the school, get used to the new systems. So as an inclusion team, I would usually advise, don't allow teachers to make referrals for at least 3 weeks. Give everybody time to settle in before they start making referrals. If you don't do that, very often you end up with hundreds of referrals in the first couple of weeks where teachers are saying, I can't handle this child, their behavior is really challenging, or they have this issue or this issue, where it might just be that cooling in period where they're getting used to the school and to their new routines.
Just to add on to that, Kate's very right in saying that. But however, it is important that you go into the classes and reassure the teachers. I think getting the message across clearly that you are there, you understand that there will be students who will act up. and let them know it's a very normal part of the process of children settling into school. Because I think usually after the summer, just like the students, teachers tend to forget what it was like at the start of the year. However, we know that this cycle is going to come on. Go in there and reassure them that you've got their back. You will come back to them. Just tell them to give themselves a week, 2 weeks to settle down. By the end of the second week, usually you can already see who is going to need a little more support, because you can see the students starting to settle down. And then, of course, the one that needs the more support will sort of stick out. So just reassure them as well. It's important. They need to know you're there for them.
Yeah, yeah. Now, we'll do a really quick look at policy and legal reviews, particularly for those who are new to the UAE or new to the position of maybe leading an inclusion department. So in the UAE, the most important law relating to protection of children is Federal Law number 29. It's Wadima's law. And then you also have Federal Law number 29, which talks about the protection of the rights of children of determination. So it's important that you are just aware of those laws and that they are reflected in your inclusion policy in the school. They have to be explicitly mentioned in your inclusion policy. And it's advisable to have a plan of action for any safeguarding concerns, particularly around PODs. So having a flow chart of what do I do if a child is being abused or neglected or anything like that. Now, if you're based in Dubai, then we have some very clear guidelines around inclusion. There are specific policies, and if anyone doesn't have these policies issued by the KHDA, please feel free to reach out to us, pop us a WhatsApp or pop us an email at info@incluzun.com, and we can send you all of these documents. They're all available online, but sometimes they can be a bit tricky to find. The most important documents, if you're in Dubai, are the inclusion guidelines. The Wellbeing Matters framework is also very important for inclusion. And then if you are looking at PS 5.2 on the inspection framework, the inclusion team need to be involved with the quality assurance visits to make sure that everything is compliant. So that is looking at your accessibility, ramps, doorways, special needs toilets. All of those have to be compliant. You have to have risk assessments for students who have complex needs. There should be evacuation chairs where appropriate. And there are lots of things like that. So if you're Dubai based, these are the documents that you need to be aware of. If you are based in Abu Dhabi has either released or updated 42 policies over the last year. There's been huge changes. So it's really important that the inclusion team is fully up to date on the ADEC policies because they are very strict on implementing them. The most important policies for inclusion in Abu Dhabi are the new inclusion policy, which is going to be mandated. It's in force now. So from August of this year, schools are subject to fines if they're not compliant with the new ADEC policy for inclusion. Now, within that, probably the most difficult element to achieve, I think, is probably the appointment of one SEND teacher for every phase. So if your school has not done that, you need to talk to your principal. They have to. It is mandatory. We have to have a SEND teacher for every phase and a specific head of inclusion. So that's a legal requirement from August of this year. Another important document for inclusion is the educational risk policy. Now, this is a new policy from last year. So here we have guidelines around students, PODs, students who are at risk of neglect, students who are at risk of a lack of challenge. So more able learners would be included in that? Are they being academically challenged appropriately? Now, there's a lot of crossover for inclusion because you have twice exceptional students, those who are POD, but those who are also gifted. And the educational risk policy outlines specific actions that you need to take in documenting. There's very specific documentation, including specific learning plans for those children who would fall under the educational risk category, and also inclusion. So you will have your IEPs for your inclusion children, your PODs and your G&T, but you may also need to have a specific learning plan under the educational risk policy. So it's really important that you know what's included in that, and that you make sure you're meeting all of those guidelines. Another one is the staff well-being, and also curriculum, because the curriculum policies talks about modifications. Now, if you and accommodations, if you find it tricky to access any of these policies, again, pop us an email or a WhatsApp and we can send them all to you. That's no problem. Okay, so just a recap on the laws that you have to state in your inclusion policy if you're reviewing your policy. UAE Federal Law number 3, concerning the rights of children to appropriate living standards, health services, education. UAE Federal Law number 29, concerning the rights of PODs, and UAE Federal Law number 2, against discrimination and hatred. Those all fall under the inclusion policy. Okay, so starting off your academic year, Sharina has a question. I'll come to the chat now in just a moment, Sharina. You can ask in the chat and we'll address it. Okay, so when you're starting your new academic year, it's really important to review your action plan, or SDP, School Development Plan or Action Plan, however you want to name it. So looking back over all of your KPIs or OKRs, and OKR is an objective key result or relatable, same thing as a KPI. Looking back over what you had set for the last year, RAG rating it, which is red, amber, green. Red, I've achieved it. Amber, I'm working toward. Or green, green, I've achieved it. Amber, I'm working toward. Or red, we haven't achieved it yet. And to update that action plan for the year ahead. It's really important that your action plan reflects the elements of your previous inspection, if you've had one, and also that it reflects the academic aspirations for the department, any growth aspirations, if you're going to be implementing any new programs, if you're going to be implementing any new assessment tools, anything like that. They should all be reflected in your action plan. They should be dated with a proposed date of completion, and a specific person assigned to each item. Now, I would recommend that you take the inspection framework and go through each performance standard on the framework and see which ones are relevant to your inclusion department and how you can reflect those. So some of the best SDPs that I've seen would have the performance standards iterated on the first column, and then they would have actions that can be taken to achieve outstanding, very good, or good, wherever your school is at. Actions for the inclusion team to work toward that next goal. And it's a really good way to keep you in line when you're doing your action plan, because sometimes there's loads and loads going on and you might have a million things you want to put in there, but you don't want it to be too big. You don't want an action plan that's 30 pages long, because it won't be achievable. And just like your IEPs, your action plan or your SDP, your school development plan, should be achievable, smart, so that you're not overwhelmed completely and you can really track through what you need to do. Next, I would review the CEF. Now, we often forget that the CEF is meant to be a working document. That's the school evaluation or self-evaluation form. If you leave your CEF for the whole year until you come to inspection, it becomes a huge nightmare, a huge job to complete. But if you update it incrementally every term, go back to the CEF and see what has been happening, what can we add, how can we edit it. And for sure, when writing a SEF, it is so important to keep it concise. Don't be tempted to write pages and pages and pages in your SEF, because it will only complicate. And very often the really important items of information that you want to get across, they get lost if the SEF is too long. So you want to keep very short, very concise. But even if you take 10 or 15 minutes to review your SEF and maybe eliminate things that have been done or have been completed or may no longer be in action, and update it accordingly. Next, you need to ensure that you are reviewing your regulators' portals. Now, again, this is an ongoing thing. People in Abu Dhabi will be doing this from day one. Sometimes with KHDA, we forget because you don't have to update it every single day, but it's valuable to update it because particularly for the inclusion inspection section for the KHDA, there's a lot of information that needs to go in there. And if you wait until a couple of weeks before inspection, it's a lot of pressure, and sometimes you don't get it done as well as you might if you're doing it step by step throughout the year and updating it accordingly. But for ESIS in Abu Dhabi, you need to ensure that you're entering all of your students' details, you're registering those PODs with permission from parents. If you are utilizing external agents for support, they have to be mentioned in the students' details, and you have to update all of the students' records on there pretty much every week because there's a lot to put into ESIS. I would allocate, if you're an inclusion lead, allocate students to each of your SEND teachers to help getting all of the information on ESIS if you have a lot of new students of determination joining, because it takes a really long time, actually, it takes ages. And ensure that you're coordinating that list with your registrations list, because if they don't match, you could get you'll get a notification first, but you could get a fine if those lists continuously mismatch. So they have to match on ESIS. Okay, I would start getting in mind for inspection immediately from the start of the year. The presentation that we make of the school during inspection shouldn't be just for 2 weeks or 1 week. It should be ongoing. So ensuring that you're mindful of the framework throughout the year is a really valuable way of embedding those practices all the time. Like, I'm sure we've all worked in schools where the week before or 2 weeks before inspection, you're running around asking teachers to fill in the IEPs or getting parents to sign the IEPs. But if you're doing it constantly throughout the year, then the practice will be embedded. It'll be in place and you won't have that panic. But it's good practice anyway. We should be doing that anyway. Now, one of the most important elements of the framework to be mindful of is PS 1.3, learning skills. And that speaks a lot about teachers in lessons and how they can show progress from students' individual starting points. And that's where your IEP is so important, that if you have, or your ALP, if you have advanced learning plans, that you are showcasing real true differentiation for kids. And that could be as simple as the teacher referencing the IEP in the lessons, that they might say to the child, oh, you've achieved your second target on your IEP, let's mark that off, or take a sticker, or give yourself a smiley face, or however they are marking it. It should be a live working document in lessons.
Just to add on here as well, Kate, because, you know, we had a summit last week, and one of the things that we focused on was policy. I think what we would like to drive home is that use the policy, look at it and understand it. It's actually a stepping stone for you to build up your inclusion department. If you look at what the criteria are, they'll tell you where you are and where you want to go. And that's something that we talked about in detail last Friday, and we hope that you can see it the same way. Every single criteria there, it's a guide. I switched my mind from being afraid of the policy to trying to understand it. Of course, I'm never going to be 100% comfortable with it, and I'm never going to 100% achieve everything. Realistically, it's going to be very hard. But looking at it, I could highlight what I thought was important and what would get the inclusion department to be better, where we can encompass more children in there. Because at the end of the day, that's what we all want to do. So
Yeah.
look at it from that mindset.
Yeah, exactly. It's like it literally is a handbook of how to be outstanding. Now, as Mita said, it's almost impossible to be outstanding. And I've done dozens of inspections. I've never seen a school that is consistently outstanding in every area, in every department. And it's not a realistic expectation either. But if you look at good and very good and really aim for achieving very good at least some of the time, whether you're an outstanding school or not, even if you're graded outstanding, it's impossible to have teachers and kids performing at that level all day, every day. It's impossible. We'd all burn out. But aiming for a strong good and a very good most of the time is realistic and it is achievable. Particularly for inclusion, if you have a really good set of systems and you understand your students and what they need, then it's achievable for sure. Okay, understanding your tiers of intervention. At this time of year, it's really important that you are setting out your provision maps. Now, a provision map will reflect all of the students on your inclusion register, particularly tier 3, those who are having one-to-one support, not necessarily with an individual assistant or an LSA, but one-to-one support from the inclusion team. So this would generally be your tier 3 students' intensive support. And tier is the same as level or wave. They're the same thing, it's just different terminology. So looking at what support each of your tier 3 students are getting, but you need to document that. You need to show how many pull-out sessions they're getting, how many push-in sessions, what programs are they on, and how are you tracking that support. And this is different in every school. Every school we go to, they'll have different models of how they're tracking. But something as simple as an Excel sheet that will showcase maybe your list of tier 3 students, how often they're getting support. You should have when that support started and a projected exit date, because the goal for inclusion is that we build enough independence and skill that the child will no longer need support. Now, some kids we know will always need ongoing support, but the goal for every child, as much as possible, should be that there's some exit point, whether it's a year or 2 years or even 2 weeks. Sometimes kids need a very short intervention. We should have that trajectory on there as well. Hugely important tool for every inclusion team is the flow chart or your referral process. What happens when you make a referral for a student? Now, this is predominantly for teachers and parents so that they know what happens. Very often we come across inclusion teams where they just have, oh, somebody will send me an email, or I'll meet them on the corridor, or they'll say it to the principal, or they'll say it to the SEND teacher. That should not be the case. There should be a systematic referral process, because otherwise kids will fall through the cracks, will miss out cases, or teachers won't know fully what to do. So what we would advise is to have a very clear flow chart that is visible in every single classroom and on corridors where appropriate, but it should be in every single classroom. I would always have these laminated and I would stick them maybe under the fire escape or fire drill, the posters that are in every classroom already. A standard, consistent chart across the school is really important. Now, when you're creating your referral flow chart, it's useful if you can to add in there the QR codes or live links where possible to the flow chart. So if you can, you would have a specific referral form a standard referral form, and I would advise doing these either on JotForm or Google Forms so that it is really easy to monitor it on that parent Excel sheet. So you have your referral forms. I would have a link in there to any screening tools, and I'll show you a little later on in the presentation. I can show you now. We have some really useful screening tools where it's really valuable for teachers to have a screener for all of the main areas of need: dyslexia, dyspraxia, autism, ADHD, just so that they can start eliminating what the condition might not be. If a teacher fills in a screening tool, it really makes them think about the student's need carefully, because very often we get teachers will write a referral and they'll just say, oh, he's got behavioural issues, he must be POD. But what are the issues? As an inclusion team, we're always running around, we're very busy. So you need to have an idea of what the behaviours look like, when do they happen, what are the triggers, what has the teacher tried already and what hasn't worked. So in your flowchart, for your referral flowchart, I would indicate an area where the teacher has to make some adjustments and accommodations before the inclusion team come and get involved, because it might be behavioural, it might be something social and emotional. So the teacher should definitely be trying some accommodations and modifications before we start doing observations. So links to all the observations, and on your flowchart, it should clearly state the time frames as well. How long is it going to be, inshallah? How long do you hope it would be for a referral to be made and a member of the team to come and do an observation? It depends on how big your team is and how many referrals you're getting. You might be crazy busy, but it should be less than 2 weeks. We should all be aiming for less than 2 weeks, and ideally maybe 1 week. So from point of referral to when you come and do your first observations, try to keep that as short as possible. Then you should clearly outline what is the process. If the child has individual needs, how long before you meet the parents? What happens after you meet the parents? Once you have permissions, can you recommend external providers to do maybe an educational assessment, a psychoeducational assessment? Perhaps they may need some more specialized assessments if we suspect something like dyslexia or dyspraxia, autism, ADHD, something like that. Very important to remind your teachers and your SEND team that only the head of inclusion really should be talking to parents about suspected conditions. No teachers really should be saying to parents, I think the child has autism or something like that, because it's not their area of expertise, and sometimes teachers will misinterpret behaviours. So it's valuable to have those conversations with your leadership team to make sure that teachers know they shouldn't be making those kind of assumptions. And even as a head of inclusion, it's tricky because we may not know. So it's always best to recommend for an assessment first, unless you are very, very confident that you know what the child is experiencing.
Right. So usually, I'm just going to slip in some things here. It's fantastic that you're asking all these teachers to do these observations and then try to put in strategies in the class, but please support them with suggestions that they can use. So usually what I used to do was on an A4, I would have the 4 main categories of needs, under which I would have general strategies, because it's just not possible to cover everything, but just to give them an idea. And I would have this all prepared with a link. So all I would do is I would email the teacher the link and say, listen, can you have a quick look here, because you'll find the strategies that you need. Or you can put a link and say, okay, here is the documents that you need to do the observations. So always guide them, because remember, you are the inclusion expert. What you think is easy is actually quite challenging for them. So always give them a hand and make them feel supported, because you might be only working with so many students. They have a whole lot of students that they have to manage with a whole lot of other things. Now, talking about identifications and speaking to parents, the safest bet always is to use the word red flags with the parents, or just concerning behaviors, concerning markers that you are seeing. I don't think any of us here, unless you are a certified educational psychologist or something like that, should make like a formal identification. So that's how you speak to the parents, and explain to the teachers as well. When they speak to the parents, tell them, oh, you are seeing some concerning behaviors, but the inclusion leader will come back and speak to you about it, set up a meeting. I think that moving forward, that's always the best way.
Thank you. Yeah, yeah. I'm just looking at, a lot of people are asking if we can put up the presentation. So I've just added our links to our social medias. Every month we record the presentations, we post them on YouTube. So there are hundreds of forums where we've been really lucky. We've had wonderful experts joining us to do presentations, and on every kind of area for inclusion, whether it's need specific or practice specific in schools. So definitely check out the YouTube channel. Just as Mita was saying there about the giving the teachers tools, we have developed a whole series of one-page teacher support tools. And if you can do this in your setting, definitely it's valuable, where you give the teachers practical strategies to use in class. And we would attach this to the IEP, depending on the child's needs. So whether it's dyslexia, whether it's dyspraxia, whichever, we'd have really clear guidelines as to what can the teacher do in class tomorrow to support that child, because they're the really valuable tools. I've just seen somebody, if we can explain a little more about the flow chart.
Yeah, the flow chart. And somebody's asked if you can make it larger. Is it possible?
Yeah, let me with that. The reason I have it on presentation mode, guys, is because I can't see the Zoom call if I don't have it on this. So it's a little blurry. I can see it's still a little blurry. But the purpose of the flow chart is for teachers and for parents to know the process for a child of determination once they are referred. So you would begin, like here, it says, you are concerned that a student has an individual need. This is the start point for a teacher. What do you do next? You would come up. You would do in-class support, quality teaching first, and then has that worked? If not, you meet with the grade level lead, discuss the consequences, meet with the inclusion team. If that doesn't work, then you set up an assessment, you plan. So you'd have an observation from the inclusion team, you decide on the plan of action, and you'd have follow-up meeting. Then you'd have planning. So you'd be tracking the students, maybe changing their status on the register, and then you'd move through. So it shows teachers and parents the exact journey that a student would take if they are being referred by the inclusion team. And then has the student made progress? Yes or no? If yes, maybe they can be removed from the register. If no, then they just continue with adjusted support appropriately. I hope that makes sense. So this could be shared on the website, in classrooms, and with parents if a child is being referred.
Now, if you don't have this flow chart, like I always say, don't reinvent the wheel. Speak to another head of inclusion. They usually have something that you can work on. It may not be exactly what you need for your school, but it will be similar. It will give you an idea of what to do, where to go to. Speak to them. The whole idea of these forums is for you to collaborate and speak with each other and support them.
We can share this one. Now, I created this using, it's kind of a complex software. So I can't share the editable one, but I can share this as a PDF so you guys you can emulate this in your setting. It doesn't have to be as complicated as this. You could pop one out on Canva, or you could do a very simple. It's the process is the most important part, and it should be in the appendix of your inclusion policy. Okay, next thing that I would recommend, if you are starting your academic year for the inclusion department, set up your inclusion calendar. It's so valuable to keep us on track, because if you're an inclusion lead, before you know it, it's going to be November and December. And we only have, I think, 3 or 4 teaching days in December with testing and everything. So it's so important to set out exactly what you hope to achieve every month, and highlighting on there, let me extend this one. Maybe highlighting on there things like coffee mornings, periodic coffee mornings, when you're doing your IEP reviews, when you're doing your data captures, when you're updating your academic plans, when you're updating your SDP, your school development plans, and also putting in there key dates where you have to update information on ESIS or on the KHDA portal. SPIA, I believe, are launching a portal next year. I don't think it's open yet. You register the kids, but it's just a send list as of my knowledge to date. But they will be opening a portal. So make sure you keep your eyes on SPIA to ensure that you're compliant with them as well if you're in Sharjah. Over the coming weeks, you should be getting all of your IEPs in place. Don't forget to note the children's mainstream data on the IEP. This is something that's missing in a lot of schools. You should have the students' academic data in there, and if possible, if they're doing a Cat 4, that data should be on there as well. The purpose of that is so that you can see if a child is making 100% progress on the IEP, but they're not making any academic progress, then the IEP is not serving the purpose for the educational setting. There should be a reflection of progress in the mainstream academics. Even if it's teeny tiny progress, it should be there so you can show triangulation between the IEP and your mainstream academic achievement. Now, even today, I'm on campus at one of my schools today, and even today I've had a bit of an argument with my inclusion team here about the length of the IEPs. I have seen IEPs stretching up to 30 pages long. Now that, guys, I can tell you, nobody's going to read it, not parents, not teachers. No teacher has time in a lesson to open up and rifle through a 30-page document. The most effective IEPs that I have seen is a 1-page IEP. And every school I work with, I recommend the 1-page IEP. You can have a pupil profile in the inclusion department, sure. That can be as large as you want it to be. From an inspector's perspective, I will tell you that very, very rarely do we get the chance to read through all those IEPs. So when you're creating an IEP, think really carefully and very realistically who is going to read it. And if you're spending days and days of your time writing IEPs, those are days and days of time that are not supporting teachers and not supporting students. And if you really think honestly, be honest with yourself, who reads it? Because from an inspection perspective, you do not need to have really long IEPs. And this is a mistake that often schools make. They think if we have loads of documentation, the inspectors will love it. Almost the opposite. You want to keep things as concise as possible. Keep it really short. If you have a 1-page IEP that's maybe stuck on the wall with the name blacked out, or it's a working document, as Nita was saying earlier, it should be a working document. The teachers can glance, what strategies am I using today for this child, especially in middle and high schools, in secondary, because a teacher may not really know the kids very well. If they've got 300 or 400 kids on their books, they won't know every individual well. So having a 1-page quick reference IEP will be the most valuable for them.
And a working document means that you can scribble on it, you can write on it, ask them to put down their points. What did they see? Something that worked, something that wasn't effective, something that they would like to be changed, to be reviewed, because they may find that the child is not making the progress that that you're asking for. So it should be a realistic representation of what is happening in the class, and it doesn't need to be big long sentences, just a short one saying, oh, great, needs to be changed, child not showing whatever along that way. But that's what a working document is.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah. And make sure your IEP is barrier focused. Uh, we face a lot of challenges with schools around academic IEPs. All of the research categorically shows that the most valuable IEP is a barrier-focused IEP. Academics are the responsibility of the teachers. An inclusion team is responsible to remove the barriers to learning that the child is facing. Now, implementing an outstanding IEP, generally, we would always advise, number one, observe the student, understand the student, follow the flow chart. Then establish communication with all stakeholders. So I used to open an email stream where I would have the parents, the teachers, the SEND team. If appropriate, you would have external agents, everyone on one email together. So everyone is participating in the student support. Request all stakeholders to send you their top 3 targets on email before your first IEP meeting. That way everyone is forced to think about what their desired outcomes are for the student, and where appropriate, definitely have the student give their preferred targets. Then you come together for your face-to-face meeting, and then you discuss, okay, your targets are this, our targets are this, the speech therapist targets are this. How can we choose the top 3 or 4 most appropriate targets? Write up your SMART targets and then track and monitor the IEP. And really importantly is to triangulate the IEP against the mainstream data. So how are we triangulating? Make sure you have progress trackers for everything. A simple Excel sheet that demonstrates whatever program the child is on, so that you can see them moving through their programs throughout the year. And then you can upload that to your provision map, so you can see which students are making progress. And again, triangulating that against your mainstream data is very, very important. Moving on to your staff, if you're an inclusion lead, you need to ensure that all of your staff have a JD, a job description. So learning support assistants, shadow teachers, your SEND teachers, you yourself, if you're a head of inclusion, any specialist staff who you have, they should have a job description. Ensure they all have police clearance, and make sure that they're all registered with the regulator. And they should all have a schedule. And please make sure that your shadow teachers get a scheduled break every day, because very often schools don't schedule a break for them, and they really struggle, they suffer. And it's one of the most difficult jobs, especially if they've got challenging kids. They need a break, and the teacher needs to take responsibility for the child during that break period. They shouldn't be bringing the child with them. Especially if they've got very challenging kids. It's not fair to ask the LSAs to stay with them all day with no break. It's not. They're humans, so we need to ensure that they are scheduled breaks as well. Then questions that you can ask your team after maybe a couple of weeks in role. Are they clear about their role? Are they monitoring their own role? What CPD would they like? And what changes might they make? Also, what are their strengths, and where do they feel like they can contribute most to the school? Because sometimes we don't take time to do that. So as a lead, particularly, if you're the head of inclusion, these are some of the questions you should be asking your team. Okay, I hope that was a pretty comprehensive overview, just to keep us in line, keep us in track. What are the things that we need to be doing to start the new academic year? Does anyone have any questions? Let me check on the chat. Hi, May, welcome. Agree regarding the IEP. Yeah, it's got to be short and easy to use, has to be easy to use. I'm just looking back. Any possible way to presentation bigger? Yeah, I'll share the flowchart. Anyone who wants to get the flowchart or any of those, just pop us a message either on our socials, which I've shared below, or on our email on info@incluzun.com. I think that's pretty much it for today, guys. No more questions on the group.
Yeah.
We hope you have a wonderful, wonderful year ahead. Don't forget that if you need shadow teachers, IAs, LSAs, please let us know. If your families are struggling to find someone, I'm sure we can help. We've got about 200 LSAs across the country, and they're all over, from Fujairah to the Western region in Abu Dhabi. So just pop us a message or a connection. We'd be happy to help.
And if you are a head of inclusion and you're looking to join a group, we have a wonderful group where we support the heads of inclusion. Send us an email or reach out to one of us. We'll add you to the group. If you are an LSA or a SEN teacher, then there will be a separate group for you guys. But please do feel free to reach out to us regardless if you have any other questions. And like Catherine said, have a wonderful start of the year.
Yeah. It's going to be a good year, I'm sure of it. If anyone, I see a number of people asking about sharing, just pop us an email and we'll share on email for sure. All right, everyone.
All right. Bye, everybody.
Recording. Ma salama. Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye.
Thank you, Miss.
A reminder that
Thank you,
everybody
Miss.
must enter the competition.